From the heartland of America and the gateway to the West, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie, and welcome to Coast AM. Next hour, his name is Jonathan Zapp. He's a paranormal investigator. How parasites can be controlling the world, and I don't mean the bugs, not those kind of parasites. He calls them energy sappers. Yes, I'm in St. Louis for just a week, needed to check in on some things, also wanted to take a plane flight just to see how things went, and I've got to quickly tell you, I flew on Southwest, and they did a great job getting everybody there on time. They really did, considering what we have been going through over the last couple days. But I've got to tell you, I'm fortunate enough because a lot of the things I have duplicate things in Los Angeles and St. Louis, so I don't have to bring a lot of things when I travel. But I went lightly, got through the line okay, and then when we were ready to board the plane in Los Angeles, ready to get on the plane, they decided they wanted to spot check the plane, but everybody had to go through a check. So before we gave them our boarding pass and went onto the plane, we had to open up our bags, and they had to check everything you carried on. And to me, that was a little over, I think. But it is a hassle right now to fly. There's no doubt about that. I'll talk to you more about that during the week. In Lebanon, rocket launches, airstrikes, artillery barrages fell silent Monday, and then they started picking up again. Hezbollah rockets went into Lebanon. But they have been replaced with a new war of words between Hezbollah's fiery and defiant sheik and Israel's prime minister, each declaring victory in the 30-day conflict. Israeli Prime Minister Olmert, facing challenges from rivals at home, told Parliament that the offensive had changed the strategic balance in the region, ending the state within a state run by Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. He said most of the guerrilla group's arsenal of weapons was destroyed. Meanwhile, Hezbollah's fiery leader, Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, went on Hezbollah's television to declare a strategic and historic victory against Israel, a declaration that prompted gunfire across the Lebanese capital. The counterclaims of victory came as Lebanon announced it would begin preparations to send 15,000 troops into southern Lebanon under the terms of the United Nations brokered ceasefire agreement. Also, that there will be some international troops there to beef things up. Let's hope that this stays. In Iraq, though, the problems continue. The U.S. military says that a natural gas explosion was to blame for a series of blasts that killed 47 people in a predominantly Shiite neighborhood the night before. Some residents say, no, they were car bombs. It was a rocket barrage. But the U.S. military says it was a natural gas explosion. The condition of the former Israeli Prime Minister, 78-year-old Ariel Sharon, has deteriorated further. Sharon has been in a coma since suffering a stroke in early January. A new brain scan shows that the deterioration in his brain function. He's also developing pneumonia now in both lungs, and a scan also says that he has developed a new infection. Time is near for him. The last two of the 11 Egyptian exchange students who failed to show up at their college program here in the United States have been apprehended. They were in Richmond, Virginia. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents arrested them at an apartment building in Richmond. The students were to attend a month-long program at Montana State University, and they decided they didn't want to show up. So the university reported them to Homeland Security, and it was a good thing that they did. Homeland Security, by the way, is saying that these students are not considered a terrorist risk. In New York, a sad story. 5 kittens thrown into a frying pan with pork chops and hot oil were recovered at an animal shelter. They're there now getting better. That's the good part of the story. The man accused of scalding them was awaiting a court appearance. He went to a friend's house. The friend had left the kitchen, and this guy decided to toss these 6 or 7 week-old kittens into the cooking pan. The kittens suffered slightly burned skin. They are recovering. Maybe they should do the same thing with that individual, huh? Not to worry with this story. Scientists have discovered the possible presence of bird flu in the United States in swans near the banks of Lake Erie, but does not appear to be the worrisome strain that the government has long feared. All this hoopla about the pandemic, about the bird flu, 138 people have died worldwide since this all started a few years ago. In Florida, a pregnant woman in labor driving herself to the hospital crashed her car and gave birth while trapped in the mangled, partially submerged vehicle. Her name is Kenyatta Biggs. Spent more than an hour in the car, and it was just an incredible story before she and her newborn daughter were rescued and taken to a hospital. She suffered a broken leg. She and the baby are doing well. The baby, by the way, has been named Miracle, M-Y-R-A-C-L-E. A search has begun to locate the original film footage of man's first steps on the moon. The footage of the Apollo 11 crew's landing on the moon is one of the 20th century's most important artifacts. Some believe the tapes are stored somewhere in the archive at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland, but who knows? Richard C. Hoagland, our science advisor, head of the EnterpriseMission.com, has been following this story. Richard, ever since you started talking about it, it looks at least that somebody's beginning to look for these films, huh?
Again, it looks like Coast to Coast has done it again.
I love this story.
Well,
Tell me.
It's really kind of peculiar because now we have John Sarkissian, who was the operations scientist at the Australian Radio Telescope facility at the Parkes Observatory, who kind of put this out in a PDF that he and a team of ex-NASA people were looking for these tapes.
Right.
And he told Space.com today something really bizarre. He says, I'd like to simply clarify that the tapes are not lost as such, which implies they were badly handled, misplaced, and are gone forever. This is not the case.
Where are they?
Well, this is kind of like one inside crowd protecting the other inside crowd. They didn't want to embarrass NASA. Apparently, they've been looking for these things for at least a year, and some people claim they've been looking for them for 2 or 3 years, and they never noticed, like in 1971 or 72 is when they last went missing.
Unbelievable story. Well, let's hope that they get to this because these are priceless tapes and films.
Well, the story gets even weirder. It turns out that there are other scientists, other people who are looking at lunar data and are coming up empty. There's a Philip Stuckey, who's an associate professor in London, Ontario, who's looking for lunar data to complete an atlas of lunar exploration. And he told Space.com today that he was looking for images from an unmanned spacecraft called Explorer 49. It was a NASA radio astronomy mission that went into orbit around the moon. And they had a really cool panoramic camera to monitor the deployment of the booms, which took pictures of the moon kind of incidentally. And he says it seems like the science data from the mission were preserved, but not the images.
That's weird.
And then the Soviet Union is responding that they have people looking for old lunar data there that somehow now they can't find. Do you see a pattern, George?
Well, as you know, there are no coincidences. There's something strange here. I'll tell you, Richard. Well, should we still keep up the heat, or do we let it go now?
No. We obviously have to keep up the heat. I have a newfound friend, a pen pal, who was the station manager for TV 49. Remember the D.C. television station that tried to simulcast our program the other week? He has been heavily involved. He's actually been contacted by some of the NASA in-crowd. Get this. They told him, the NASA guys are looking for these tapes, that the C2C crowd, as they call them, and me, RCH, are nuts and should not be trusted on this story. Now, they called him immediately after we did the show. We then found out, remember how I directed this audience to send emails to the NASA administrator? That there was some kind of operation in the administrator's office called, get this, Operation Barracuda Block, designed to keep any emails sent to the administrator containing the words Apollo or Apollo 11 from reaching him.
That's why you didn't want that put in any of the emails in terms of the heading.
That's right. I wanted people who are obviously upset about this to put things like freedom and rights and the Constitution in those headers so that if they delete those, they'll actually have to be doing, what they really are doing behind the scenes, which is deleting freedom and rights and the Constitution.
Well, we'll keep up the heat, Richard. Those tapes and the films belong to us, the American people, and we'll just keep pushing, okay?
Well, we think we've got some really extraordinary new data to present at the Joshua Tree Conference, and I think when people see that, they're going to realize why these tapes have gone missing.
Richard C. Hoagland heads up the enterprisemission.com. Richard, thank you. Hey, by the way, for decades, our solar system has consisted of 9 planets, even as scientists debated whether Pluto really belonged. Then the recent discovery of an object larger and farther away from Pluto threatened to throw this slice of the cosmos into chaos. So should this newly found icy rock known as 2003 UB313 become the 10th planet, or should Pluto be demoted? Well, in a moment, we're going to check in with astronomer Philip Plait, because at a 12-day conference, scientists are talking about this right now in the Czech Republic capital of Prague, trying to decide whether to subtract Pluto or christen a new one. We'll be back with Philip Plait in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Philip Plait is an astronomer and a good one, author, webmaster of the Bad Astronomy website, the blog, and the Bad Astronomy/Universe Today bulletin board. He received his Ph.D. in astronomy from the University of Virginia. Philip Plait on Coast to Coast. Hello, Philip. How are you?
Hi, George. Doing great. Thanks for having me on again.
Good to talk with you. Hey, tell me about this conference that's going on now in the Czech Republic capital of Prague. I mean, are they really considering dumping Pluto as a planet?
I wish I knew. It's the conference is the International Astronomical Union, or the IAU, and it's the largest professional society of astronomers in the world. They're meeting in Prague, and boy, oh boy, do I wish I were there. Prague is a beautiful city, and they meet every couple of years, and there are all sorts of things that go on. News releases are sent out, and there have already been pictures and discoveries coming out. But the IAU is in charge of a lot of things, and they have different committees, and one of them is the nomenclature committee, the people who decide the naming of names. So if you find an asteroid, or if you discover a new crater on some moon around another planet, you want to get it named, you have to go through them. So the question becomes, is Pluto a planet? When we discover an object, do we call it a planet? Do we call it an asteroid? What do we call it? And the thing is, you know, Pluto has been called a planet since its discovery in 1930. But a few years ago, astronomers have been discovering these objects, which are close to Pluto's size out there, even farther from the sun. And then one, as you mentioned before the break, at UB313, which is a little bit bigger than Pluto, and it's way far out. And the question becomes, you know, if we call Pluto a planet, do we call this thing a planet? And if there's this thing out there, how many more are there? There could be thousands, millions of these things. And, you know, oh gosh, I'll tell you, I talk to my friends about this, and I get email about this, and everybody says, you know, is Pluto a planet? What do we do? And I tell them, you know, look, Pluto's a planet because the IAU says it's a planet. The question is not whether Pluto is a planet. The question is, what is a planet? You know, we kind of have an idea of this. The Earth is a planet. Jupiter's a planet.
Right.
But, you know, whenever you try to define them, you find yourself getting into trouble. You say, well, it's an object that's round, and maybe it orbits the sun, and you think, well, we discovered planets around other stars. Okay, a planet's something that's round that orbits a star. Well, what if a planet gets ejected from its solar system? That can happen. Okay, you know, and you can keep playing this game. And I've found that anytime anybody comes up with a definition of a planet, even a scientific one, I can come up with an object that they would call a planet, that you would just go, that's not a planet. And I would find objects where you would say, that's not a planet, when by definition it is.
Well, so Philip, what would you call Pluto if it wasn't a planet? I mean, would it be an asteroid? Would it be just a big old space rock? A burned out comet? I mean, what would it be?
Well, what happened is that out beyond Pluto are these giant balls of ice. And they're part of what's called the Kuiper Belt, or the Edgeworth Kuiper Belt, depending on who you're talking to. And they're basically giant balls of ice, giant comets out there. And Pluto may just be the biggest example of one of these. It may not really be a planet like the Earth or Mercury or Jupiter or Saturn. It may just be one of these giant ice balls. And the thing is, these things really are different than the Earth. They form differently. They formed in a different part of the solar system. They were probably ejected out to that area. You know, passes of Neptune, its gravity will slingshot them out into the outer solar system. And so these objects really are different than what we think of as planets. In my opinion, if I had to define a planet, and I can't, I'll make that clear now, I don't think I would call Pluto a planet. I'd say we have 8 major planets and then zillions of these little things which are difficult to describe.
Because actually they're talking about the possibility that they could expand the solar system to 23, 39, they see even 53 planets. I mean, that sounds huge on the scope of it, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, that's just because we're used to 9. Back when Ceres, the largest asteroid, was discovered, that was in the year 1800. Actually, it was January 1st, 1800, the first day there. And everybody hailed it as being a new planet. Well, they started finding more of these things, and they realized they weren't very big, and they were in between Mars and Jupiter. And it became quickly clear that this was a different class of object. But for a while, people were calling them planets, not for very long. Now, we have sort of the same situation here. Pluto was the first one discovered. There are zillions of more of these. But now we have sort of this grandfather clause. Pluto's been a planet for 76 years. It's going to be tough, and especially in the public's mind, to change that now, and a lot of astronomers aren't happy about it either.
Okay, so what happens to our daily life, Philip, if they decide not to continue to call Pluto a planet? I mean, is it over the way we know it?
Oh, chaos, panic, dogs living with cats. No, in fact, I think the people who are going to be scrambling to catch up with this are going to be the astrologers, and I'm going to sit back and really love watching these guys trying to explain away why we knew these were planets all along, or we knew Pluto wasn't a planet all along, and I'm just going to sit back and cackle at this.
I love it. What's new on your plate, Philip?
Oh my gosh, all sorts of things. I've got the blog going, and that's doing pretty well. And as a matter of fact, this IAU meeting really is starting to put out a lot of data. They just released a picture today from Hubble that is gorgeous of a star-forming region. They just released a new picture in the infrared of the Orion Nebula, probably one of the most famous objects in the sky. And it's a cool picture. And so keep your eyes open. Check, the online websites for astronomy, including mine, and you'll find all sorts of really cool pictures and interesting news coming out over the next 2 weeks.
Philip, I think history will say that the Hubble telescope may be one of the greatest tools, greatest instruments that astronomers have ever had.
That's true. It's funny because it's not a very big telescope, but its advantage is that it's out into space. And so once it's out there, it doesn't have to worry about the atmosphere and all the problems with that. And so it's really changed the way astronomers have done astronomy. But I think its real role in history is how it's changed people's attitude about astronomy, because the pictures are so gorgeous and so almost mind-numbing that it's changed the way the public has viewed astronomy, and it's just made it wonderful for people like me, because those of us who evangelize this sort of thing, it really helps us a lot.
Did you see where they think now that the universe may be even older than they had anticipated?
Oh, yeah, I heard about this, and basically these guys were looking at a nearby galaxy, and they determined its distance using an independent method, a way that had not really ever been done before to another galaxy. And they got a number that was not what matched the numbers that had already been determined for the distance of this galaxy. And it got reported that this means the universe is bigger and younger or older or something. I can't even remember. And really, that's not what's going on. What's going on is they're saying that somewhere down the line, one of our distance methods to this galaxy has failed us. And nobody knows which one it is. But the thing is, we have like 10 or 15 ways of finding the distance to this galaxy, and they all agree except this one. So it sounds to me like these guys may have something in their data that fooled them into thinking that this galaxy is farther away than it really is. But we won't know until we get more data.
All right. Well, great. Philip, by the way, the website, badastronomy.com, very easy to get to, very easy to kind of roll through it. And the blog is always updated. You've got some great information there. Thank you for your service, by the way, Philip. It's great to have astronomers and people like you as part of Coast to Coast as well.
Well, thank you very much, George.
All right. You take care of yourself. It's Philip Plait. He calls himself the bad astronomer, but he's a darn good one. We're going to have open lines for you now for the rest of the half hour. So let me give you those numbers. Get ready. Write them down. Or if you have a great memory, here you go. West of the Rockies, 800-618-8255. East of the Rockies, 800-825-5033. First-time caller line ready to roll for you at 818 501-4721, and the wild card line is 818-501-4109. I'm George Norrie. Get ready for open lines now on Coast to Coast AM. Well, a man from Austria is planning to run around the world. That's right, run around the world in 365 days, all for charity. He said he'll start his marathon 25,000-kilometer run on January 1st of next year, completing about 70 kilometers a day. The 38-year-old, who hopes to raise money for Austrian children's charities, great effort, by the way, plans to run diagonally across continents, beginning in Asia, finishing in Austria on December 31st, 2007. He will be accompanied by medics to ensure that he remains in good health. Speaking of good health, pick up the After Dark newsletter. The next issue that's coming, you get 14 for the price of 12. Read all about the day I almost died. Yes, that's true. Call 1-888-727-5505. That's 1-888-727-5505, or go online at coasttocoastam.com. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. I'm here in the cave. Checked things out. You know, we had one heck of a storm in St. Louis several weeks ago where 600,000 homes and people and businesses were without power. 600,000 clients of Ameren UE, and it took them about a week to get everybody's power restored again. The cave was pretty well intact. We were pretty lucky. Let's go to the phones. First-time caller line, you're on the air with us. Where are you calling from?
This is Joe from Bossier City, Louisiana.
Hey, Joe. Thanks for calling. What's on your mind?
Definitely a pleasure. Something came to mind as I was listening to you, something that I experienced several years ago, and that is missing time. And I hear you mention that particular phrase along with several other guests of yours, and I was going to see if perhaps it was sort of the same thing that I experienced. It sort of goes as follows. I was out camping following a trail, and as I was walking the trail, I noticed, because there was a couple forks in the trail, that I had come back to a place that was the same place I'd just been to. I don't know. So I figured, maybe I got turned around. Well, something just wasn't right. So I looked at my watch, and sure enough, it was like 2 hours ahead of what I thought I was, or the time that I thought it was. And I just stood there puzzled. And for the rest of the day, I was just dumbfounded, just wondering what happened. And it was just so bizarre.
You know, we really don't know what has happened, aside from just something happening to your memory or fast forwarding your memory. You know, there are a lot of possibilities. I mean, what about the possibility that you walked through another dimension, for example, in what could very well be called a parallel universe? And, you know, where there's another you and everything's almost the same. Maybe it's out of kilter for a little bit. Maybe it's 2 hours out of kilter, and somehow you cross over and then cross back. It is weird. And you know you feel fine. There's nothing medically wrong with you.
Right, exactly. I mean, I totally understand that, and I'm definitely a believer of the parallel universe and different things. That's a possibility I'd never thought about, but, you know, who knows? I may have just taken a trip.
And I got to tell you, people who drive their cars, it's happened to a lot of people all the time as well. So thanks for your call. Appreciate you being on Coast to Coast. Let's go east of the Rockies. It's your turn. Hi there.
Hi, my name is Calvin. I'm calling from Georgia.
Hi, Calvin.
Okay. I have a friend that's a shop steward on my job, and he has a patent from a German scientist. He bought him out, and he's partners with him, and he brought it to the United States and put it and patented it. It is a generating system, like, you know, those portable units that are gas-powered.
Yeah.
It's about that size. It's made out of plastic. It's self-contained, and it runs on just water. It makes no noise and no pollution, and it generates, if not more generation than a gas-powered one.
Calvin, how does this thing work?
It creates static electricity. It's self-contained. And somehow it's vented, too, so the water constantly gets oxygenated. They've actually put this portable unit in an electric car and taken the electric batteries out and put this unit in there, and it's still in their testing, and the scientists are still scratching their head. It's used about a quart of water a month, and it drove about, I don't know how many miles, maybe 900, 1,900 miles.
My God, what a great novel invention this could be. Now, let me ask you a little bit. In terms of the generator, how much power does it throw out? What can it power up? The size is, the application is unlimited. You can make it a power plant size, like size of a power plant, and it would generate as much energy to run the whole United States. Oh, my God. If you needed to, let's say you wanted to run just your house on a regular basis, just your house, how big would it have to be?
He has a unit that's about half the size of a refrigerator, and it's going to run off tap water, and it'll probably use about a gallon of water a month, and it makes no noise, no noise at all, and it just makes constantly energy, and you run your whole house off it. It's innovation generation. Home Depot has 1 million units on order through him, and it's already being manufactured in Illinois.
I got to tell you, if Home Depot is buying this and it starts getting out into the public's hand, this guy could win a Nobel Prize for science.
He's going to be big. He's going to be big as
huge.
Bill Gates.
Can you get him on the show?
He don't want to go public, but it's been dying. I've been dying to just let the public know about it.
Well, I mean, if Home Depot is going to be buying these units, it's public, right?
Yeah. I think they've sworn to secrecy until the day they're on the market.
When do you think this is going to happen?
In 3 months. In 3 months, you'll see advertisement in the media and TV commercials and stuff.
What do you think it's going to be called? Do they have a brand name for it?
I believe he said it's the new innovation generation or something like that. It's phenomenal. He has the one that's a refrigerator size. You'll be able to run everything, air conditioning, heating, lighting, everything off of it.
Okay, and how much do you think that'll cost, Calvin? What will it cost us?
He's saying about $4,000 to $5,000 the unit for the house, and the portable one is about $1,000 through him, and he's saying Home Depot's going to turn around and sell them for $19.99, and he's got a lot of orders overseas, Lebanon, Egypt, everywhere, like the third world. I mean, he's going to be like Edison, putting the lights on in America.
This is absolutely incredible. This is one of the greatest things I've heard.
I was listening to Art Bell last night about his discharge bills that he has to pay, and I'm like, this would be the ideal thing for him. He'd be out in the middle of wherever he is, and he'll have his own power plant.
I love now, and you say this is a silent unit. It doesn't make a lot of noise.
Right. It's a silent unit. It's self-contained. And I asked him, how are you going to be worried about the Chinese or somebody copying it? He says they have that new patent thing they have to obey by.
Right.
Plus, he has a backup. If any seal on the unit is broken, it will disintegrate. And I said, well, what if they X-ray it? I says, well, he says it's all protected by lead and stuff, and the whole thing is made out of plastic. He says it's uncopyable. All
right. Would you stay in touch with us? Would you send me an email? I just want to stay very close to you as we get to the date that you think this thing is going to hit the market, okay? I mean, this is incredible. And just send me an email. It's george@coasttocoastam.com. That's one of the most startling things I've heard. A plastic generator, it uses just a little bit of water a month. It's silent and can power up everything. That's too good to be true. Well, remember what they say about that, if it's too good to be true. Wildcard Line, welcome to the program. You're on the air. Hi there.
George?
Hi.
Hi, this is Veronica. I'm calling from Chicago. I'm also a first-time caller. How are you?
Oh, fine, Veronica. Thanks. I'm glad you made it in.
Thank you. George, you know what? I'm currently taking some biology classes. I'm going to go into radiological technology.
Okay.
And there's just some things that aren't adding up for me in terms of medicine.
How so?
We've been doing cell structures and things of that nature, and it just appears to me that things like cancer or AIDS are not as elusive in terms of finding a cure as I think that the medical industry would have us to believe. Outside of the body, these things are kind of really fragile, and if you can break down the nuclear envelope of these cells, you can therefore stop it from replicating.
Okay, but are you saying, Veronica, though, that science should be able to cure these horrible diseases, and they're not?
Yes, you know what? I live in Chicago, and I'm in a pretty metropolitan area.
Sure.
And in my circle of friends, I have some gentlemen that are gay and that are HIV positive. And
well, let me tell you, it crosses all kinds of sexual preferences.
I'm simply saying, no, I do understand that, and I'm simply saying that this is my exposure to it. And it just appears to me that 25 years into this disease, I just cannot believe that we're nowhere closer to finding a cure for these.
Well, yeah, but aren't these medical cocktails that they've put together? Aren't they working? Aren't they slowing down the virus a little bit?
You know what, George? Slowing down is not the same as a cure.
Well, that's true.
It's not the same as a cure. And also in terms of cancer. Now, recently, Coretta Scott King, she passed away from cancer.
Yeah.
But as I understand it, prior to her leaving this world, she went to Mexico for an alternative therapy that's not offered here in the United States.
Well, we had a doctor on, I think it was last week when I was back in Los Angeles, who said something which was kind of peculiar because I don't agree with it. And he said that if mainstream medicine found cures for specific ailments and diseases like cancer, like AIDS, that they would rush to the market with it. And I don't necessarily believe that. I think they make more money in funding and grants, don't they, than they would with the cure?
To me, it's like this. If you keep a person on maintenance, you're making more money than if you cure them. And I feel that this, and see, I'm going into a medical field. So, it's just, a lot of things are not swaying.
Okay, so you don't trust mainstream medicine, do you?
You know what? Listen, I believe there has to be a blend. You know what? I recently, here in Chicago, a movie came out called America, Freedom to Fascism.
Yeah.
And the director and producer...
That's our buddy Aaron Russo.
Aaron Russo was there, and he did a Q&A across the street at the borders. And, before he did anything, he said, please excuse him because he was undergoing cancer treatment in Germany.
Yep.
In Germany.
True.
And he himself said, George, he himself said that when he was diagnosed here in America, that the doctor said that you're a very sick man and that you need to get your affairs in order because you are not going to make it.
Well, Veronica, I agree with you. Now, that doesn't take away from some dedicated medical practitioners here in the United States. I mean, men and women who have devoted their lives and careers and futures to developing cures and finding things to help people. I mean, there are a lot of people trying to do that. But at the same time, there's huge industries that I think want to continue playing the game as they make more and more money in research than they do with the actual cures. So I'm not going to deny what you're saying may not be true. I mean, there are a lot of things you've just said that may be right on the button, as a matter of fact. Let's go to our West of the Rockies line. You're on Coast to Coast with us. Hi there.
Hi. How are you doing, George?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
I just have two questions. But first of all, I'd like to say that conversation you had with that man about the
generators?
Plant,
yeah.
Man, talk about interesting. That's astounding if it's true.
I hope it is. It's one of those things where it sounds, again, too good to be true, but I'm telling you, if it hits the market, I'm buying one, just to have one.
Hey, you're not the only one.
Yep.
Okay, the first question I have for you is that it was stimulated by I don't know if it was a previous show that was recorded or if it was a current interview.
Okay, what was it?
Pardon me?
What was that? Try to test my memory.
About the Apollo films.
That's my buddy Richard Hoagland. He was live.
Exactly. Okay.
All right.
In regards to that, I was reading in the library a couple magazines, and one of them I came across an item that said that the Russians were going to send up some probes that were going to land in the area where supposedly on the Sea of Tranquility, where we landed,
right,
and check out the equipment there. And the question I have is, if someone wanted to make sure that there was really something landed there that we were there? Has anybody just used a telescope to look? And
well, you can't use the Hubble because it's too powerful and the moon's too close. But we have tested the fact that we were there. I mean, the astronauts, when they were on the moon, had left some experiments, and one was a reflective experiment with light and laser. We were on the moon, believe me. I mean, if I'll tell you anything about life, take that one to the bank. We were on the moon, and our dedicated astronauts who risked their lives, they went. Did some photographic pictures that might have been done in a studio get mixed in with some original pictures? Entirely possible. And did that help create this controversy? Maybe, but believe me, we went to the moon. First-time caller line, you're up. You're on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Fine, thank you. I've been listening to your show for a long time. I just love it. But I got a very bizarre story to tell you because I'm your age. I'm 56 years old.
Yeah.
And I've heard your EVPs on the radio. And you know how you just have that doubt, like I've never, unless you experience something like this yourself, it's the most bizarre story. This story I'm going to tell you, I felt like I was in a horror movie myself. I mean, I'm serious. There's not just EVPs that happen here, but let me go on with the story because I know your time is short.
Yeah, I've got 2 minutes for you. Go ahead.
Right. My brother-in-law works at did work there at a car dealership in Pomona, California. And he came in, we play cards every Friday. He came in and says, the light went upstairs at this car dealership. There's no offices. I could see why. Nobody works up there. It's all downstairs. It's a 100-year-old building. He's there with the secretary at night doing the books, and the light goes on. So he goes up, turns it off, comes back downstairs. Next thing, light goes on again. He goes back upstairs, turns it off, and all of a sudden these unseen hands, this is the story he told me, pushed him down the stairs.
Pushed him down the stairs? Like he tried to kill him?
They tried to kill him. So he comes in playing cards. He says, my energy is drained. Zapped. I said, you know what? I said, I've never tried this, but I got one of these CC Crane recorders, that I got the radio too. I said, I'm going to take this recorder with me, and I'm going to put a external mic on it.
All right.
And then my friend had a video camera, low light video camera. So myself and I went. My daughter that's in college, she went, and my brother-in-law went, and then the guy with the video camera, a good friend of mine. And this is my first experience now. I've never tried this, but we're going to find out what this is all about. So we go there, right? And the place is dark. And says, let's leave it that way. He's filming, and Heno, that's short for Eugene, my brother-in-law, he goes upstairs. And as we're walking through the hall, he's going upstairs, and he's explaining, okay, now when I was here, and as I did this, blah, 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 right? And just at that moment, there's a flash of light. I've got this on video, George, a flash of light that completely illuminated.
Can you get us some of this so we can get a look at it and put it up on the website?
Can. Absolutely. You can have it looked at. You can have it engineered. You can see that that we have not tampered with this tape.
I believe. Are you a believer now?
I'm 100% believer. 130% believer. But this is not all, George.
Okay, I got to run though. I'm at the top. I'll give you 10 seconds. Go for it, real fast.
Okay. We asked what the name was, and it said Luella. I mean, it's clear on the tape. I mean, we actually were communicating with this thing, and it was answering back on the tape. We didn't hear the tape until I got back home. We played it back. You know what I'm saying?
All right. You promise you'll get it to me?
I promise I'll get it to you.
You got it. We'll take a look at it. Lex, get ready for this one. And if you like it, if it looks good, you get it up on the coasttocoastam.com website. In a moment, we'll be joined by John. Well, our program tonight has to do with energy sappers. You've heard us talk about that before. Parasites, human parasites. And this is going to be a special program for me because our guest, Jonathan Zapp, is very well knowledgeable about my late aunt, Dr. Shafika Corregula. She was a parapsychologist and a darn good one, MD doctor, and he's done some work into some of her work. So we'll talk with Jonathan Zapp about that as well when we come back on Coast to Coast AM. Jonathan Zapp graduated from Versailles College with honors in philosophy and English, received his master's degree in English from NYU. He is an author, teacher, philosopher. He has written extensively on human evolution and contemporary mythology. He was recently featured in 2 DVDs, Prophecy and the End of Time, a dialogue between Jonathan and Mayan scholar John Major Jenkins about the nature of prophecy and the 2012 end date, and Looking Toward the Event Horizon. Jonathan has an extensive background in Jungian psychology, paranormal research, and dream interpretation. For 27 years, he's been using the tools of the Jungian psychology to study popular culture, contemporary mythology, and dreams for evidence that we are getting signals from the collective unconsciousness about the nature of a quantum evolutionary event approaching the human species. Special guest tonight on Coast to Coast. Jonathan, welcome back. It's been too long, my friend. How are you?
Oh, I'm great, George. I'm grateful to be back on your show.
Oh, likewise, indeed. And next hour, you'll bring us a special guest for a little bit. I'm looking forward to that. As a matter of fact, in a half. It's not too long from now.
I'm looking forward to it as well.
Jonathan, what have you been doing lately since we last talked, which was well over a year ago?
Yeah, it was March 2005. I've been working away at a unique website. Maybe you got to take a look at it.
Sure
There's
did.
Oracle on there I've been working on for a quarter of a century, and finally got that online, and have gotten almost everything I've ever written and thought about on that one website. A lot of the images I've taken and other things, so that's been keeping me very busy for the last year or so.
Tell me about these mind parasites that you've been doing some research on. I love that phrase, by the way.
Well, and I didn't create the phrase. That came from British occult scholar Colin Wilson, who was once a guest on your show, I believe.
Sure. He's a good man.
It really is a phenomenon that relates to the energy sappers that your aunt, Dr. Carigula, looked at as well. But it extends into a wide variety of areas that affect a great deal of what's happening on this planet. And I think the context of what's going on is, I don't know about, well, I guess I do know what you've been feeling for the last couple of weeks, and a lot of people have been feeling. It's just an even more disturbed sense about the world and what's going on in the Middle East. And I think that ratcheted down just a notch when we had the ceasefire. Today's the first full day of that. But I think everybody senses that this is just a lull, and that our species is in really serious trouble, and that it's time for sort of some tough love, and for the species to face some uncomfortable truths that we just haven't faced before. And I think that, even in your individual life, when you find that you're banging your head against the wall with some problem that you just can't solve, and you keep at it, and it keeps defeating you, and just like the world has been trying to create world peace and trying to resolve the problems that just keep getting worse. Usually what that means is that there's some crucial piece of information that you need to solve the problem, but that you're missing. And I think the case I want to make tonight is an idea of what part of that piece of information might be that we're missing. We've heard from some of the physicists on your show that 90% of the universe is dark matter, and they don't even know what it is. And Aldous Huxley once called the unconscious of the human psyche a dark continent. And so I think there may be things on that dark continent that are not recognized.
Now, Jonathan, do you see, though, a difference between mind parasites and energy sappers? Because, my aunt, when she did her research years ago, I think she came to the conclusion that a lot of the energy sappers didn't know what they were doing. I think parasites do.
Well, absolutely. There's a range of different phenomenon here, and I think what your aunt covered in her book, Breakthrough to Creativity, is she recognized as a person with credentials in psychiatry that once she opened the door to the paranormal and to the parapsychological, she realized that, wow, this is something that changes the way we look at everything. It changes the way we look at human beings, and it changes the way we look at various forces that may affect human beings. So these are related phenomena, but there is a difference, and there are sort of different species of parasites, you might say. And so in order to look at this, we have to consider that it's the human psyche that is the source of war, that is the source of environmental destruction. It's the single factor that's behind all of these problems we face, except for the occasional errant asteroid or something like that. Otherwise, everything really at its ultimate source relates to human psychology. And one of the problems with understanding human psychology, and I think Dr. Caligula was starting to realize this too, is that we aren't able to define what mind is. And not only are we not able to define what mind is, we're not able to define where it is. There are some people that came, especially after the 60s, when your aunt was writing, and Freudian psychology and other modalities were still pretty popular. There was a shift to behaviorism, and then the neurological materialists took over. And they still dominate the colleges and universities of this country. And they would have you believe that the mind, which they actually believe is an illusion and doesn't exist anyway, but to the extent that we have any thought process, it's the result of biochemical process in the brain. They call it an epiphenomenon, or a secondary effect of this biochemical process. But no one has shown that the mind exists inside the walls of your skull. In fact, night after night on your show, we get powerful evidence that that is not the case, from near-death experiences, for example. That the mind seems to have a hyperspatial aspect, a non-local aspect. So since we don't know where the mind is, we don't know that we're alone in our minds. This is a presumption that kind of underlies the thinking in a lot of modern psychology, and yet it's never been proven, and there's no reason to believe that we're alone in our minds. We're not alone in our bodies. In our bodies, we have parasites. Every human being has them.
Well, I know that she, was a staunch believer in extraterrestrial life. She was very close to remote viewer Ingo Swann.
Right.
But there were moments, Jonathan, in her life she was very frustrated about really not being able to pierce through the veil of this unconsciousness or the consciousness. Sometimes she felt like she was getting very close to it, especially with some of her subjects and clients that she was working with. And then other times she felt like she just couldn't get through it. And then, of course, all of it was thrown out the window in her very untimely death, which is still strange because there are some people that believe that she died in a car accident. We were always told that she died when some electrical appliance fell into her tub when she was taking a bath. So
Well,
it's
kind of
very bizarre. It was a bizarre story.
Well, Colin Wilson, in his novel of ideas, The Mind Parasites, makes the case that when people are going to have a breakthrough or are producing some sort of breakthrough, he used Beethoven as an example, that would help to wake the collective up, that there would be forces that would come and try and sabotage what they were doing. And I can understand her frustration because she was coming from the sciences. And the science likes to sort of look at things under a bright light. It likes to be able to measure things and so forth, and I'm very sympathetic with that. I would like to be able to do that too. But there are some things that are sort of at the horizon line of human awareness, and in order to be able to look at them, we have to sort of look through a glass darkly. We have to be willing to accept that we cannot see these things with perfect clarity and objectivity, except in rare cases. But we still need to look, and we need to discern the forms that we can see, even if they're shadowy and flickering at times. And I think that's what your aunt was willing to do, and even more today than in the 1960s when she wrote that seminal book, Breakthrough to Creativity. Forces would rise up to resist that. People in the sciences, but who are really not taking a scientific attitude, but the attitude that's called scientism, that will dismiss certain things as not possible without any scientific or rational basis to their dismissal.
Yeah, I mean, I have always wondered, and so has our family, if she was done in, because we never knew if she was getting close to one of these breakthroughs, as you point out, Jonathan. And it is true that when scientists seem to be getting close to something when mainstream science doesn't want them to. Something strange happens to them. You know, we've got these incredible cases of 80-some microbiologists who have died under very strange circumstances. We have the death of Dr. Eugene Malov, who was trying to find an alternative energy source. I mean, all these things just continue to happen just before these individuals break through. Like her book, Breakthrough to Creativity,
right.
Just before they're ready to do something on a grand scale or release some information, something happens to them. And I've gone beyond saying this is ironic, and I don't believe in coincidences. I think something happened to her. I think she was getting very close to something, and somebody, I don't know who, but somebody did her in.
Well, there's a variety of ways that kind of thing can work. There is a tendency in biological systems, and we're all part of a biological system. We're all part of a food chain, and there's a kind of homeostasis. There's this like dialed-in equilibrium, and the whole larger organism wants to maintain that food chain, wants to maintain that homeostasis. So if there's something there that's like a mutagen that's going to change the balance of power, the way things work, then there's an immunological response. And so these forces can sort of send out their white blood cells, and the white blood cells might be the appliance falling in the bathtub, some like strange freak accident. There are many different ways that this can be made to happen. And so there's this natural resistance. I mean, in many ways, the story of Christ was like that. You have somebody that was trying to change everything, and you see the result. They're immediately attacked. So that when there's a breach in the inner eye, something will come in and try and seal it. You see that in the movie The Matrix. If somebody starts to wake up, and The Matrix is very much about this theme, and in parallels with the Gnostics had to say about the parasites, then forces come in, agents come in of whatever sort to bring them down, if possible.
Give me your take, your definition of the mind parasite. I'd like to get your view on that.
Okay. Well, if I can, I just want to talk a little bit about regular parasites and then build from there to give it a little bit more of a rational basis for people that might be skeptical.
And these aren't the regular ones that we get with insecticide. This is something else we're talking about.
Exactly. But let's just talk about the regular ones for a minute, because people often underestimate them. Now, in nature, we have three of the most classic relationships are parasitism, predation, and symbiosis. These are relationships of energetic transaction. Well, actually, parasitism seems to be the most common, or at least parasites outnumber all other types of species 3 or 4 to 1. There are more parasites than any other type of organism on the planet. All species have parasites. And many of those parasites themselves have parasites, just like the mosquito's a parasite and it carries malaria, another parasite. Sometimes the second parasites even have parasites. And so as human beings, we have many. AIDS is a parasite, tuberculosis. And parasites have an ability to take over their hosts and to even travel through several different animals to complete their life cycle. You can read about some of these amazing biological parasites in Parasite Rex by Carl Zimmer. And one of the things that biologists talk about in relationship to parasites and evolution is what they call the Red Queen hypothesis. Now, this comes out of Alice in Wonderland. There's a moment in Alice in Wonderland where Alice is traveling with the Red Queen, and they start running faster and faster, but she notices that they're not getting anywhere. And the Red Queen tells Alice, now here you see it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. Well, this is what biologists are telling us now about the coevolution of parasites and host species. Because parasites outnumber us, and because they evolve so quickly, and because they are so much cleverer than people realize, that other species need to constantly evolve just to maintain, just to tread water. In fact, some biologists at Oxford, and this is gaining a lot of credence now in the biological world, believe that sexual reproduction, as compared to asexual reproduction, sexual differentiation that's so much a part of our whole world, it came out directly as a way to compete with parasites. The only way to keep up with the parasites and the genetic adaptations that they were constantly doing to become more effective was to create sexual differentiation, which through greater genetic novelty gave us a chance to keep up in that evolutionary war with the parasites.
Keep up or fight back?
Really, keep up is all we've been able to do. We are the first species that really has an ability to recognize what's going on with parasites and to do something about it. Now, another aspect of this is that we are capable, as human beings, of missing an entire dimension of life. Now, this was the case with the whole microbiological world. Until the year 1674, nobody, no culture, as far as I know, had a clue about the microbiological world until a Danish shopkeeper, his name was, I'm not sure if I can pronounce it, but it was A.V. Leeuwenhoek. And he invented the first microscope, and in 1674 he saw the first microbiological organism, a protozoa, which is probably a giant in the microbiological world. If you were to tell somebody in 1673, hey, did you know that you're not a single being, but you're a colony of 100 trillion animals, they would have you burn at the stake.
Yeah, they wouldn't believe you.
Thing you could possibly think of saying. They had no idea about. In those days, surgeons washed their hands after surgery, but not before. So then, when we discovered that, hey, there's not just all these things down there, we're actually made of them, and there's a fantastic variety of species. And of course, we would find the same classic relationships of energetic transaction: parasites, predators, and symbionts. And so the case that I am making is that there are energetic organisms. Now, we are the only culture that does not recognize them. The only culture that does not recognize energetic organisms is scientism, fundamentalist materialism. They're recognized in Christianity. They talk about the incubi and the succubi.
Right.
In China, they talked about the Kui. And so many of their customs in daily life, these were like disincarnate spirits. They in their medicine, for example, the 361 points of the 14 main meridians of acupuncture, 17 of those points have the word Kui as part of their main or secondary names, as points where these entities could feed or attack us energetically. And Western science can't explain how acupuncture works, but it does admit that it does work. It's just that right now we have a blind spot about ourselves as energetic beings and about energetic organisms, though every other culture recognizes them. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm saying that the mind parasites are energetic organisms, and like other life forms, many of them are parasites, but there's many, many different species.
Why are they the way they are, Jonathan?
Well, they're the way they are because everything has to feed off of an energy source. You do, I do, plants do. Everything has an energy source. So for
it's survival, right?
The host, exactly. So they're going to look for the richest deposit of energy they can find. So blood is a popular one, right? Mosquitoes will go after that. It's a rich source of energy. Well, what's the richest source of energy on this entire planet? Well, it's obviously human energy, human psychic energy, human sexual chi. That's what's dominating the whole planet right now. When you look about your studio, everything there is the result of human energy.
Let's talk a little bit more about Jonathan when we come back. And also, you're going to bring in, at least for a half hour, another guest. His name is Alex Gray. We'll tell you about that in a moment on Coast to Coast AM and why Alex Gray is coming here. Well, here we are in August, but you know what? Pretty soon it'll be the holiday season. If you're looking for some interesting gifts, pretty inexpensive gifts, there's the Coast to Coast gift shop. You can find that by going to the coasttocoastam.com website. There's a link there at the bottom of the homepage. There's also a link there under the banner section on the left-hand side of the homepage screen. You can get anything you want there, the Coast to Coast, well, almost anything, I guess. But go take a look. Some new items, T-shirts, hats, and just have some fun. We'll be back in a moment with our special guest, Jonathan Zapp, and his guest, Alex Gray, in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast with our special guest tonight, Jonathan Zapp. And Jonathan, I'm going to read the intro to Alex Gray, and then I'll let you explain a little bit more about Alex, okay?
Sure.
Alex Gray went to the Columbus College of Art and Design for 2 years. Later, he attended the Boston Museum School for 1 year. During this period, he had a series of induced mystical experiences that transformed his agnostic existentialism to a radical transcendentalism. Alex then spent 5 years at Harvard Medical School working in the anatomy department. He also worked at Harvard's Department of Mind-Body Medicine, conducting a series of scientific experiments with others to investigate subtle healing energies. Now, with that, Jonathan, tell us a little bit more about Alex.
Well, Alex is a visionary genius, and he has the technical skills of a Renaissance master, but the content of his images, I can only compare in importance, certainly in the effect of my life, to William Blake or Michelangelo, because he pulls back the veil on an unseen world that we all sense, but can only see in flickering moments, and he shows it to us with a kind of X-ray crystalline vision that is absolutely life-changing, and a lot of people have expressed similar sentiments about him.
All right, with that, let's bring in Alex Gray. Hi, Alex. How are you?
Hey, George, Jonathan. Thanks for having me on tonight.
My pleasure. Tell us a little bit about this change of these series of mystical experiences, and what happened to you?
Well, basically, my professor introduced me to LSD, and I had never taken any back in 1975. It happened to be on the very same evening that I met my wife, Allison. We've been together ever since. But those two events were a turning point in my life. I had been pretty much of a nihilistic or existentialist kind of agnostic character, and my art was reflecting that struggle of a world without spirit. And I sort of called out to, if there was such a thing as God or spirit, I need it now. And within 24 hours, my professor had sort of just offered me this drink with the LSD in it, which he warned me about, and I met my wife. And so within 24 hours, I felt like my prayer was kind of answered, because the LSD gave me a mystical experience where I felt I had entered into a luminous realm that I had no idea about previous. And it was a world of light that I felt was extremely spiritual. And so since that time, my wife and I would continue to take these sacramental sort of sojourns with the LSD, and at some of those times we had some remarkable visions that really changed both of our artwork and gave me a new way, a kind of transfigured way to approach the human body and the sort of atmosphere surrounding the body that clairvoyants have talked about for millennia.
Alex, you'll have some people who say, how can you advocate some of these drugs, these psychedelic drugs? And I'm sure throughout your history that question has come up. How do you answer that?
Well, I think that I'm not so much of an advocate as simply I'm telling you what happened to me.
To you.
And I think that for some people who are more borderline personality, it's been shown that these powerful psychedelics can catalyze a pre-existing sort of pre-psychotic kind of state. And so they can destabilize people who are already somewhat mentally unstable. So not good and should be avoided by them. But for people with normal sort of I don't know what a normal mind is.
I was going to say, what is normal anymore, Alex?
But who are fairly stable individuals, these substances have had a long history with human culture, and there's still many indigenous and shamanic sort of religious uses of these kinds of sacraments, the psychedelics, and I think that they've been a demonized kind of method of reaching toward the Godhead, and it's too bad. I think that there's great power there, and however, we know that the West has a troubled relationship with these kinds of things. Adam
Sure.
and Eve. Adam and Eve is basically the story of a drug bust, I guess.
Well, we know shamans have used ayahuasca. They've used the LSD. They've used all kinds of other drugs in order to travel, let their minds travel throughout the universe, basically, doing things that they couldn't do in a normal state. What did it do for you? I mean, what were you able to do to accomplish?
Well, for one thing, the psychedelic state convinces you that there is a visionary world. If you hadn't, had your fill of it before, just through your own dreams and things, and if you don't remember your dreams, this is a luminous world that is inhabited by various kinds of beings, and you're really not sure whether they're simply projections of your own imagination or whether you're actually perceiving a realm where these beings are inhabitants. And that's this sort of problem. Are the angels out there, or are they in there? And they're kind of both. That's what it seems like.
Jonathan, why do we need the release of the drugs to alter the mind? Why can't it be done without it?
Oh, it can be done without it. Oh, absolutely. And the spiritual practices that the yogis and shamans have done, just drumming can get you there. And certainly the meditation practices of the Tibetan Buddhists, they have relationships with beings that are outside of sort of the material world. They're in this luminous visionary realm, and we do spiritual practice to get in contact with them. It's what mantras are all about.
What have you found in this other realm, Alex, that is out there? You are right. In some cases, it has been surrounded with a shroud of being demonic and evil, yet I think evil obviously exists, not only on this planet in human beings, but I'm sure it exists in the other realm as well. Did you ever come across that? Did you ever have to travel through that?
Absolutely. It's you're most likely any kind of psychedelic traveler, a psychonaut, will have experienced both heaven and hell. And so your own greatest fears are projected there on your screen for you to confront as well. And you may feel that you've died. You may feel that you've left your body. You may feel that you've visited a realm of torment, and that is sort of inescapable. And yet you're also in these visionary realms able to go to some of the higher heaven realms. And so that's why your guidance from the set and setting and the loving support of those around you is extremely important.
This is Jonathan breaking in. I'm wondering, Alex, if you could give us an example of one of these journeys, and of course the example that I'd like to hear are the circumstances that led to the painting your masterwork, Demons and Deities Drinking from the Milky Pool, an image that the viewers can see linked up on the Coast to Coast website right now.
Thanks, Jonathan. Well, the LSD session that brought about that painting was with a group of people. There might have been 15 to 20 people, and they were in our loft in Boston. This was back in the 70s, and we had all determined to take LSD. A lot of these people were strangers to me, but we were hosting a group that was led by an associate of Leary's. And at any rate, I thought that they were all mature folks, but after the drugs started to take effect, it seemed like chaos kind of broke loose. One person was walking around vomiting into a bucket, another person was laughing hysterically, another person was crying, and just somebody was taking their clothes off, other people, and it just seemed like, crazy. And I was lying there having taken a double dose and assuming that we were going to all be taken care of. And in this kind of melee, I saw above us, it seemed like a swooping numbers of these forms that seemed like both deities and demons. And I saw that there was this, what looked like vibratory sort of milky pool of kind of electric milk. And all of us were at the periphery of this sort of pool of milk, and it was being drawn through us. And this was sort of like the pool of life energy. And it was being drawn through us as through all the activities that we did. And this was providing a feast for these other beings that were hovering above us and sort of like dining on the energy that we were exuding. And it was a very strange thing to see ourselves in a kind of energetic food chain that these beings, in fact, had organized us all as a feast for themselves.
Is this what you would call the parasites, Jonathan?
Yeah, I think so. I think what Alex perceived, and there's a slightly more full description on the website, a document called Alex and the Mind Parasites, is I think he saw the top of the food chain. And we, in our ordinary state of consciousness, we think that we're the top of the food chain, and I think that's a delusion that's very convenient to those that are actually on top of the food chain. But I'm wondering, Alex, if the chaotic behavior you saw among the people in the party, did you feel that the parasitic deities, I think there are at least two of them in the painting, do you think that they were somehow influencing that in some way?
Well, that's a good question, because at one point I did feel like this entire thing had been orchestrated by these beings, that our coming together, in fact, was not an accident or anything. It was kind of orchestrated. And so, gosh, it's really, really difficult to say, when we feel influenced to do certain things or intuitively guided to do certain things. Many of the times we seek guidance from a higher realm, and I think that in the same way that one can be vulnerable to the influence of beings from a lower realm.
What do you think they were after, Alex? What did they want?
Well, I think that it was basically our energy, and at least these particular beings seem to be delighted by a kind of orgiastic emanation that was from this particular crowd. But I think that there are, I suppose, mind parasites that I've tried to depict in other paintings, like the self-hatred painting or the despair painting. We can almost feel them like attachments to our energy body, and that tend to drain us and deplete us. And whether we can just use that symbolically as a kind of metaphor that's potent and might suggest a way to at least deal with them. I remember specifically at one time being on one of the most harrowing LSD adventures I ever had, and I felt like I was kind of a flapper in the wheel of fortune, and that every realm of sort of being and dimension was one of these little slots that the flapper was like open to. And at one such, dimension that was flying by, I saw this really strange insect-like creature kind of lunge out at me.
Declaring victory in the 30-day conflict, Israeli Prime Minister Olmert, facing challenges from rivals at home, told Parliament that the offensive had changed the strategic balance in the region, ending the state within a state run by Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. He said most of the guerrilla group's arsenal of weapons was destroyed. Meanwhile, Hezbollah's fiery leader, Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, went on Hezbollah's television to declare a strategic and historic victory against Israel, a declaration that prompted gunfire across the Lebanese capital. The counterclaims of victory came as Lebanon announced it would begin preparations to send 15,000 troops into southern Lebanon under the terms of the United Nations brokered ceasefire agreement. Also, that there will be some international troops there to beef things up. Let's hope that this stays. In Iraq, though, the problems continue. The U.S. military says that a natural gas explosion was to blame for a series of blasts that killed 47 people in a predominantly Shiite neighborhood the night before. Some residents say, no, they were car bombs. It was a rocket barrage. But the U.S. military says it was a natural gas explosion. The condition of the former Israeli Prime Minister, 78-year-old Ariel Sharon, has deteriorated further. Sharon has been in a coma since suffering a stroke in early January. A new brain scan shows that the deterioration in his brain function. He's also developing pneumonia now in both lungs, and a scan also says that he has developed a new infection. Time is near for him. The last two of the 11 Egyptian exchange students who failed to show up at their college program here in the United States have been apprehended. They were in Richmond, Virginia. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents arrested them at an apartment building in Richmond. The students were to attend a month-long program at Montana State University, and they decided they didn't want to show up. So the university reported them to Homeland Security, and it was a good thing that they did. Homeland Security, by the way, is saying that these students are not considered a terrorist risk. In New York, a sad story. 5 kittens thrown into a frying pan with pork chops and hot oil were recovered at an animal shelter. They're there now getting better. That's the good part of the story. The man accused of scalding them was awaiting a court appearance. He went to a friend's house. The friend had left the kitchen, and this guy decided to toss these 6 or 7 week-old kittens into the cooking pan. The kittens suffered slightly burned skin. They are recovering. Maybe they should do the same thing with that individual, huh? Not to worry with this story. Scientists have discovered the possible presence of bird flu in the United States in swans near the banks of Lake Erie, but does not appear to be the worrisome strain that the government has long feared. All this hoopla about the pandemic, about the bird flu, 138 people have died worldwide since this all started a few years ago. In Florida, a pregnant woman in labor driving herself to the hospital crashed her car and gave birth while trapped in the mangled, partially submerged vehicle. Her name is Kenyatta Biggs. Spent more than an hour in the car, and it was just an incredible story before she and her newborn daughter were rescued and taken to a hospital. She suffered a broken leg. She and the baby are doing well. The baby, by the way, has been named Miracle, M-Y-R-A-C-L-E. A search has begun to locate the original film footage of man's first steps on the moon. The footage of the Apollo 11 crew's landing on the moon is one of the 20th century's most important artifacts. Some believe the tapes are stored somewhere in the archive at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland, but who knows? Richard C. Hoagland, our science advisor, head of the enterprisemission.com, has been following this story. Richard, ever since you started talking about it, it looks at least that somebody's beginning to look for these films, huh?
Again, it looks like Coast to Coast has done it again.
I love this story.
Well,
Tell me.
It's really kind of peculiar because now we have John Sarkissian, who was the operations scientist at the Australian Radio Telescope facility at the Parkes Observatory, who kind of put this out in a PDF that he and a team of ex-NASA people were looking for these tapes.
Right.
And he told Space.com today something really bizarre. He says, I'd like to simply clarify that the tapes are not lost as such, which implies they were badly handled, misplaced, and are gone forever. This is not the case.
Where are they?
Well, this is kind of like one inside crowd protecting the other inside crowd. They didn't want to embarrass NASA. Apparently, they've been looking for these things for at least a year, and some people claim they've been looking for them for 2 or 3 years, and they never noticed, like in 1971 or 72 is when they last went missing.
Unbelievable story. Well, let's hope that they get to this, because these are priceless tapes and films.
Well, the story gets even weirder. It turns out that there are other scientists, other people who are looking at lunar data and are coming up empty. There's a Philip Stuckey, who's an associate professor in London, Ontario, who's looking for lunar data to complete an atlas of lunar exploration. And he told Space.com today that he was looking for images from an unmanned spacecraft called Explorer 49. It was a NASA radio astronomy mission that went into orbit around the moon. And they had a really cool panoramic camera to monitor the deployment of the booms, which took pictures of the moon kind of incidentally. And he says it seems like the science data from the mission were preserved, but not the images.
That's weird.
And then the Soviet Union is responding that they have people looking for old lunar data there that somehow now they can't find. Do you see a pattern, George?
Well, as you know, there are no coincidences. There's something strange here, I'll tell you, Richard. Well, should we still keep up the heat, or do we let it go now?
No. We obviously have to keep up the heat. I have a newfound friend, a pen pal, who is the station manager for TV 49. Remember the D.C. television station that we tried to simulcast our program the other week? He has been heavily involved. He's actually been contacted by some of the NASA in-crowd. Get this. They told him, the NASA guys are looking for these tapes, that the C2C crowd, as they call them, and me, RCH, are nuts and should not be trusted on this story. Now, they called him immediately after we did the show. We then found out, remember how I directed this audience to send emails to the NASA administrator? That there was some kind of operation.
From the heartland of America and the gateway to the West, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie, and welcome to Coast AM. Next hour, his name is Jonathan Zapp. He's a paranormal investigator. How parasites can be controlling the world, and I don't mean the bugs, not those kind of parasites. He calls them energy sappers. Yes, I'm in St. Louis for just a week, needed to check in on some things, also wanted to take a plane flight just to see how things went, and I've got to quickly tell you, I flew on Southwest, and they did a great job getting everybody there on time. They really did, considering what we have been going through over the last couple days. But I've got to tell you, I'm fortunate enough because a lot of the things I have duplicate things in Los Angeles and St. Louis, so I don't have to bring a lot of things when I travel. But I went lightly, got through the line okay, and then when we were ready to board the plane in Los Angeles, ready to get on the plane, they decided they wanted to spot check the plane, but everybody had to go through a check. So before we gave them our boarding pass and went onto the plane, we had to open up our bags, and they had to check everything you carried on. And to me, that was a little over, I think. But it is a hassle right now to fly. There's no doubt about that. I'll talk to you more about that during the week. In Lebanon, rocket launches, airstrikes, artillery barrages fell silent Monday, and then they started picking up again. Hezbollah rockets went into Lebanon. But they have been replaced with a new war of words between Hezbollah's fiery and defiant sheik and Israel's prime minister, each